We'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina this weekend installing a canopy on James Dobson's Performer trike for his cross-country touring. And I wanted to just kind of give you an overview of what the canopy is going to be like. It's pretty much set up for touring. We've got some little sponsorship going on for the tour itself that James is doing. We've got a gear rack that is a new feature actually for next year, and I'm going to see if James can discover some use for that. On the top, I've gone ahead and put some carbon fiber rods up here to kind of lighten the load, and a couple more than would be standard, and some bungees that he can use as he wishes. Other than that, it's pretty much a standard canopy, and we're going to be looking at just how he's going to be using this thing. You can see it's a pretty lengthy piece, and I think once he gets it on, though, he'll probably want to leave it there. So let me get the camera over here. We'll look at the canopy itself. And from there. To start with, we need to set up the trike and the rear pannier rack for the canopy. This happens to be an adapter that if you were at the Recumbent CycleCon and rode the trike that was being ridden around, this is actually an adapter off of that same trike. And we went even a step further, and when I started putting this package together, this actually is the front portion off of that trike. Now, when we get to North Carolina, this bung will not be needed. What you'll find underneath here is a 1/4-20 stud, and in James's case, we're actually going to be drilling and tapping for this a 1/4-20 port for this stud to go down inside the derailleur tube. I've got this on there for protection during transport. In fact, this would be the bung in some of the other Performer derailleur tubes, but on this particular installation, this will not be needed. I've also, coming from the front, these are 19-inch downrods connected to a telescoping feature up here. We've got a couple of inches of wiggle room to make these longer or shorter. It just so happens that James's height and mine are the same, and I think this is going to be a real good starting point from which to adjust this downrod assembly. Underneath each one of these sleeves is a pin, and that pin can be removed so that these can telescope out in 2 inches longer, or actually 2 inches longer in this direction, 2 inches shorter in this direction. So this is where we're starting. Also on the front downrod are these fittings here, which are actually for the windshield. Now, we don't know if we're going to have a windshield installed. There's a good likelihood that we won't. But in the event that we need options, I went ahead and installed these fittings. There's 2 on the downrod assembly, and there's 2 up here on the main rod assembly that we'll look at when I flip the canopy over, but there's 1 on each side, and they fit the standard width of a standard windshield. So going back on the canopy, this is really a standard setup. The things that I did change, I changed to an additional 2 front to back rods. These are actually 20 inches long, and I made them, this package is about 12 inches wide from the widest point, rail to rail, or rod to rod. I'm also going to include some bungees just for quickly attaching something to this rack, or even to the rear pannier rack. The black canopy I selected for James based on 2 things. One, the black fabric has proven to me to be very worthwhile in supporting the attachment of the Velcro patches. I have learned within the last few days that the fabric is being changed, or actually has already been changed, and we may have to abandon black even as an offering until an additional design is looked at for the attachment of the visors. And going back, it's all standard back here. This is what you would get. The Vblock, pretty much the main holder of the entire canopy as it attaches to the rear adapter. This came off of the trike at the Recumbent CycleCon. It was actually being used on the Copenhagen wheel demo model. So this came off of that, and I actually don't know if many knew that, but the trike was actually tipped over. The Copenhagen wheel just really powered that trike a little bit too much maybe, but it was tipped over. That happens to be the adapter off that trike, as is this Vblock. There was a little scar around here at the side. I doctored it up. It's going across country. We'll see how far it can go. The underside, well, let's talk about the visors before we flip it over. I went ahead and added some nomenclature relevant to James's tour, and I'm really proud to have done this. It was something that actually just occurred yesterday as far as adding the information, and I think it will just add a little bit of additional features for the tour itself. This is what James is doing, and we'll see how well that goes. So let me flip this over and we'll look at the other side. And from the Vblock forward, the underside is pretty plain. This will be right behind James' head, and his head will be in about this area. The visors will actually be about his about where his ears are, so he can have an abundance of shade from direct low-lying sun early in the morning or late in the afternoon. I'll walk you down through here and then come back and explain what we're actually looking at. The connection on the front, for those of you who are not familiar with the quick disconnect, this will be fastened to the derailleur tube, and this will be on the bottom side, and when this trigger is released, the canopy actually comes loose. So I don't know if I can hook that back up right here. Are you watching? Maybe not. There it goes. So that locks the downrod assembly into the front derailleur tube, and with it being square, there's not the tendency for it to torque around. So that's a quick disconnect, standard feature, or actually an option, but pretty much becoming a standard feature with the canopies I build. I mentioned the windshield fittings. Here are the other two, one on each side. This dimension hasn't changed ever, so I can fit a windshield to really any canopy that's out there. On the mirrors, which are an option, has turned out really to be a very pleasant add-on feature, because when you're seated on the trike, the mirrors are pretty much at eye level. Now, I have experienced this being a fairly loose connection, so I fitted each end of the accessory bar, both the front accessory bar and the rear bar, with a vinyl cap on the end to actually increase the diameter so that this is pretty snug. I think James will be subjecting this trike to conditions that most of us will not experience, but I wanted to go ahead and build that into his canopy. Also on his canopy, I've only made two of these, what I call a gear loft, and thus far I've had several orders of clips coming in from overseas, and in both cases they were not the right size. So I've cheated a little bit by putting a rubber bushing in here just to make this snug, and we'll see if James can find a use for this gear loft. Coming to the back, we have a teether rod, and again this is upside down, but this teether rod actually provides an attachment point for tethering a camera or anything that you don't want to drop on a trail. Also, you'll notice that these sliding pieces here, actually, when the visors are deployed, as you see them here, this little sliding clip will come over and provide like a finger underneath to give it a much needed support, especially on rough terrain or higher wind conditions. If the wind exceeds comfortable conditions, of course this can go back. The visor can actually be tilted inward, and these little straps here then are for docking the visor, and that locks it in the stored position. And of course both sides can be done that way. And that's pretty much the canopy itself. Now, I'd mentioned a windshield, and I've got several of them out here. I've got the tinted version of a standard windshield, and I've got a clear windshield that is unwrapped yet. We may or may not try these. They will give you some wind resistance. That would concern me on the long run. If it was going to be raining the entire time, I wouldn't let James ride without one of these, because it gives you waist up in the frontal area of the body. It gives you a dry condition, which is extremely pleasant, especially if you're working with a camera. So the canopies with this protective film on here, you'll be able to see that the distance between these two mounting pieces here fit the windshield. This bunch of holes on either side, this collection of holes, gives us some option on the downrod assembly. Before we fit the windshield, if we do, we need to make sure that the downrod assembly is adjusted according to the rider's height, the boom length, etc., etc. So that's with the windshield. And also, I have tried to discover a way to store this windshield if it was set with James on the trip and later decided that it wasn't really needed for that day even. So I'll flip this canopy back over and I'll show you some options that I discovered. Also, while we're up near the front area, I brought these, I call them flashlights, but these can be mounted on this front accessory bar to really provide additional illumination, but also just a quick deployment of the light itself for a flashlight. So when you're doing a tour, you want to have options available, and I think that front accessory bar provides the means for attachment for a variety of things. Coming back to the rear, I wanted to show you these two packages. They are identically equipped, and there are small packages in there, lettered. Each bag has a duplicate set of lettered pouches with spare parts in them. If James happens to need some repairs to the canopy, I might be able to help him by directing him to the correct pouch and what to do with it. So just some spare parts kit. Those will collapse quite readily. They're not very heavy, pretty much lightweight parts. But I will have an identical a bag of parts to what James is carrying. Flag options. I'm going to take with me for the install of just a variety of things that to pick and choose from. Now, in James's case, I will be providing him with this plug-in module that simply plugs into the top of the Vblock, and on this is a velcroed patch on the back side to which James can apply some just odds and ends as he travels across the country. We also have a light bar up at the top that provides the means for an attachment of a single flag in the middle. I know James has been flying the American ensign or the American flag, and this would be a perfect place for that. And then the side rods, the little stubs here, illustrate what it would look like if you had, two flags out. And the one thing that I was a little cautious about on a cross-country tour with James was the dark-colored canopy. But I have discovered that with a dark background and vividly light-colored, very shiny type flag arrangement, this against the black background is maybe far better than a flag that would disappear into the backdrop. So we're gonna experiment, and we're gonna find out. I will loan James this battery pack. It's actually a Canopy daytime light, very, very bright. I will loan that to him if he wishes. I'm not going to be doing any tours here in the next few days or few months. Let me flip this canopy over and we'll look at options for the windshield. If James actually elects to leave and continue the tour from North Carolina with a windshield, whether it be the tinted or the clear, I have tried to imagine the time when maybe it's not so desirable. So I've looked at various storage options. I actually had this in the stored in the canopy. If I can get it down in there, yeah, there it goes, and connected to the front rubber fittings that I turned upside and actually refastened to the windshield, so it stayed in this position. I also looked at storage in the back. Now in this case, what I did, and keep in mind the canopy is going to be arc back here, but what I did in this case, I actually used some bungees to tie or secure the leading or the upper edge of the windshield to the rear accessory bar. So this will work, not highly desirable. And while I'm mentioning windshield, I'll probably tweak on the design to better accommodate some loading feature onto the canopy for touring conditions. I talked to James a while ago, and we talked about the distinct possibility that it's going to be raining when this canopy install is actually occurring. We're going to be in a bike shop, Performance Bicycles in Raleigh, North Carolina. They've been very kind to provide protection for us while we do the install, and they're going to do some just a minor overview of the trike itself, make sure everything's intact. But James and I discussed the possibility that it's going to be raining. So James has not been under a canopy trike when it's been raining, and I hope he records it because it is an experience that is far beyond what you can imagine. If you've ever been in a tent when it's been raining and that little peltering of raindrops on the fabric, it's very mesmerizing, and the same thing will occur with this canopy. I told James to dress appropriately. I have no idea what that means with James. Those of you who have been following his blog, James is on the other side of the envelope package. So I'm looking forward to doing the install, and I hope that some of that can be recorded so you can enjoy that part of it, and we'll just go from there. We got a canopy going on James Dobson's trike tomorrow, actually Saturday, a couple days, and warn the neighbors.